Hello everyone. For this segment we have the Bipap machine that Reggie's gonna show us some basics on.
Very basics. We'll keep it simple. Your power button, lower left hand corner. This one is high flow capable, so this one can do basically, it can mimic our OptiFlow, but it can also do Bipap. So I'm gonna put it in standby mode for now. Standby is always down here.
And I just wanna point out that this is a V60 machine. So when people talk about a V60,
Yeah, exactly.
that's what this is.
Yeah. And then if you ever hear V30, that's just a small little CPAP
Okay.
for like just regular sleep, like OSA sleep apnea.
Perfect.
So with this one, and if they are high flow capable, we have them all labeled. If you do not see this up here, it does not do high flow. And it's also right here, HFT. So if you see that, that also does the high, or that's another sticker for that. If you don't see those, it's just a normal V60 that does the pressure. So I believe that the majority that we use for high flow is the OptiFlow. So I can go over that in the end, but I think we'll focus on the ST mode, spontaneous time mode, which is what you're going to see the most, which would be our Bipap mode. So before we start, so Bipap is this is just a little thing I like to throw out there. Bipap is like saying Xerox. We use Xerox as you just go make me a Xerox. Well, Xerox is actually a company. Bipap is an actual mode owned by this company. This is a Bipap machine, and anything else wouldn't technically be Bipap. It'd be B and CPAP. Like we have CPAP and BPAP. Bi is for bi-level. I just like to throw that out there. I hope it didn't make it any more confusing, but it's a Bipap is a brand name. So for Bipap or BPAP, when you start your spontaneous time mode, so these are your basic settings, right? Your IPAP, think of that as more of like, that's your inhalation help. So if the patient is, if they're really struggling to get air in, higher your IPAP number, you can match their inhalation needs. So that is the pressure that, as they breathe in, it gives them that extra boost. The EPAP is more for like your oxygen. So even though IPAP is inhaling, it's more of an inhale pressure. Your EPAP is more like CPAP. That's a pressure that they breathe out against, which recruits alveoli. The EPAP, when you think of ventilation, we think of exhaling, right? Because you have to exhale out CO2. It's kind of inverse with this. So you got to think of your exhalation pressure as your O2 fix, and your IPAP is more of your CO2 fix. It's kind of weird, but it actually makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
So if they're having a hard time getting air in, the IPAP is your best friend. And it's funny because I just had a patient, well, I think it was on 6th floor, I don't remember, rapid response, and they were on, I think, like 12 and 6 or something. I don't totally remember. And it was not working for him at all. He was breathing faster than the BiPAP could keep up. He was trying to draw in more volume than the BiPAP could give. So if I remember correctly, I think I just went from 12 to 16, and I didn't touch the EPAP, and it matched his effort, and he looked better within like seconds.
And this is something that only the respiratory therapist will adjust.
Yeah.
Just to make that clear.
Yeah.
But to understand it, this is how it works.
Yeah, correct. But you'll typically see things like this. This will be the one you see the most. 10 and 5. 10, 5, your backup rate, anywhere from 10 to 12, 8 to 12 typically. If they're in distress and it's like an emergent, more of like a emergency situation, you can crank that up to the 20s, whatever. It's not actually giving a breath. It's just giving that pressure time.
So basically, if someone is not breathing enough for 12 times, this will make sure that we get there.
Yeah, I mean, they can breathe as much as they want. It'll keep up, but it'll try and guarantee that every breath. So if they're breathing 20 something times a minute, and we put it at 20, it'll try and guarantee that every time the patient takes a breath, they're getting these two, your settings, your IPAP and your EPAP. A basic setting that, as far as I'm concerned, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone can change. Well, nursing or RT would be the FiO2.
Yes.
Very simple. You have your O2 button down here. Push your screen and tap your arrows till you get to your desired number. You go either way, and then the coveted thing that every machine has, your accept button. So once you accept it, you got your 40%. You're good to go. Your IPAP and EPAP do not play you know, in any regard to your FiO2, think of the OptiFlow. You can have these at whatever you want, and this can be whatever you want as well. It's not like the vending mask.
So to make clear for nursing, what nursing can touch? No, 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 yes. That's it.
Yes. And so these also have the same heaters as the OptiFlows. The problem that I discussed with the OptiFlow with the tubing kinking, this is the number one issue here. When I see that the most, I've seen it on the OptiFlow a couple times, but I see it the most with this area here, because this is where your water, the line for that the water runs down, the tubing is back here. You can probably barely see it, which kind of plays to my point. And it has to run, you know, we either run it up here, you know, we feed it through somewhere, and it just kind of, we don't always have the pole. Sometimes the poles aren't on these, and we lay the bags in the back. So this is where, if you're going to see the problem where there's water in the bag, but there's no water in the actual chamber, it'll be on your V60. So definitely take a look. And this gets kinked really easily back here. And sometimes if the water bag is just on the back of the machine, gravity is not our friend. Mm-hmm. So sometimes if you see us steal your IV pole and we have water on it, that's why we do that.
Makes sense.
And common thing also, if you see this alarm, let me block so you don't know what it is. Oh, you probably know what it is. So this pressure line can pop off. There's a pressure line, it goes from here and it runs to here. Yeah, and it should alarm in a second here. It will catch it. So if you get a funny alarm, it should say something like pressure line or proximal line disconnected. It should pop up here in a second. Or patient. It should pop up. It typically does. If you see patient's disconnected or proximal line disconnected, and you are staring at the patient and the mask is on and everything's running, that's probably it. Or it has a tremendous leak. It will say patient disconnect if the mask leak is over like into the hundreds. So it could just be a big leak, you'll get that, but typically, I don't know why it's not saying the proximal line is not I wish that would fire, but I guess I can't control that. But yeah, so always check these pressure lines too. It's kind of a pain in the butt to put on, but just, you know, give it a little elbow grease and it'll, you know, just kind of wiggle it on and it'll be good to go. But
other issues that might occur for troubleshooting. So, say I come in, the machine's alarming, we check for this tube. You would also check these tubes to see if they're kinked. You check the seal of the mask around the patient. What other things could you do?
I mean, really, there's not much to it aside from your pressure lines and your actual tubing up here. There's really not much else. This is your exhalation port. So the patient is exhaling out of that. And you can see there's like fenestration holes in there. Don't ever let that get covered. Don't let the blanket be on that. Don't let anything be on this, because this is where their CO2 comes out. So if this is occluded, think of a non-rebreather on a lower flow. Mm-hmm. Same principle applies. So their CO2 is going to kind of hang in this tubing. And since BiPAPs aren't real ventilators, they don't have an exhalation port or like an exhalation line like a vent does. Everything would stay in here. So CO2 would build up in this area and it would just go right back to the patient. So never let this be occluded, ever.
That's good to know.
And aside from mask leaks and proper mask fitment, in regards to the tubing, that's pretty much about it. It's only two pieces. There's not much to it.
Okay.
That's the basics with the BiPAP.
Now we know.